I'm going to introduce Ron France. I always probably say your name wrong. Franz.
France.
Right?
Yeah, that's good. Like hands. Yeah.
Like hands.
Yeah, easy.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Ron is with the OU Institute for Quality Communities, and he's going to introduce our speakers today. And they'll probably explain kind of what this is. This is the first time for them to do something like this the day after their huge placemaking conference in Norman. So we're all kind of winging it, so bear with us, but it'll be great. So, Ron?
Okay. This is a great group. Thank you very much. This is really great to do this. We did have an IQC placemaking conference yesterday in Norman, Oklahoma, and we haven't gotten the final numbers, but we think we had around 1,200 people yesterday. So, and we served lunch and had a lunch speaker. We had a dinner. We had a dinner speaker. So a lot of chicken breast disappeared yesterday. So it was really good food, but great speakers. We had about 12 speakers come from around the world. And I believe Kelly Tompkins was here. Marcy Jarrett was there. Was anybody else from Enid happen to be there? We didn't, because it's such a big crowd, we didn't get to meet everybody. We tried. But so anyway, this year what we wanted to do is we wanted to come out and take some of our speakers to Oklahoma communities. And when we start talking with people, we start talking about where would fun places to be. And because Kelly's always been such a supporter of the Institute for Quality Communities and everything, we thought, well, come to Enid. And when we started talking to her, she said, well, I'm gone Wednesday and Thursday, and with the Arts Leadership Program, which is an incredible program. So we flipped our schedule and said, well, can we come on Tuesday? She said, sure, that would be great, and I'm in town and everything. So this is really great. Then you go to Atlanta for the National Main Streets Conference, so you sort of have a busy week. So sort of typical for Main Street. 2 weeks, yes, 2 weeks, yes. So we really, really appreciate this. This is our first time to sort of do something like this. In the back is Hope Mander, back here, who's the Associate Director for the Institute for Quality Communities. She has regional and city planning background. She has an environmental design degree background. She has a degree from college in Turkey as well. You're native of Antioch, Turkey, correct? But you consider Norman, Oklahoma? Oklahoma, yes, okay. Every now and then we have to drive to Kendall's and Noble and have a chicken fried steak. So that's our Oklahoma bonding moment there. So in the back is Anna Siprakova back here, and she is a graduate student in the Regional City Planning Program, but she's working with Institute for Quality Communities this this whole year while she's here. She is a Fulbright scholar. She's from Moscow, Russia, and so she's getting to see the real Oklahoma out here. So this is great that she's getting to come around. And so we're here representing OU. President Warren and Mrs. Warren feel so dedicated to Oklahoma towns that they put together funding, gave us this time and everything, said go out there and do something in these towns. So we're really happy to be here today. So this is our first run. We will be in Lawton tomorrow, just a few miles down the road, and then we will be in Ada, and then we're going to go do something in a suburban neighborhood in northwest Oklahoma City on Friday, and then they fly home and we collapse, right? Is that right? Okay, good. Okay, so anyway, we're very glad to be here. We've got two speakers. Chuck Marone is right here at Trip Muldrow, and they're going to talk a little bit about what they see. They travel the country working with communities, and in discussions, I believe Chuck's going to give a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation talking about what you see with communities, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and then Trip's going to go, and then we'll open it up for conversations, dialogues, and at this point, you know, we really want to keep this very informal, and we want people to address things. This is our first time through. We're going through with the same group of people, but to 4 very different communities, and we may have very different issues in each community, and that's sort of hard to do. It's not, we're going to say word for word what we're going to say 3 times over after we leave here. We'll adjust. So, would you like to go ahead and Chuck,
Sure.
and tell them what you do and how you do that?
Yeah, my name's Chuck Marone. I run a nonprofit organization called Strong Towns. We began this, I'm a civil engineer I'm a land use planner. I grew up and I still live in a small town in central Minnesota. And in 2008, I was so frustrated with how things were going and my inability to do anything about it that I started to write. I started writing 3 days a week. And after a year, a friend of mine came to me and said, you really need to turn these thoughts into something. You should start a nonprofit. And I said, well, I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. I don't really like nonprofits. He said, well, I'll fill out the paperwork. You just keep writing. And a year later, we were a 501c3. A few months later, a local foundation stepped up and said, we'd like to give you some money so you can devote more time to this. And I started working for this organization back in the middle of 2010, and now we run a national nonprofit. We have members, over 600 members, one in every state in the country, including many, many, many here in Oklahoma. The thing we talk about is why are our cities, despite having decades of robust growth, despite all of our affluence, despite all of the wealth that we have, why do our cities struggle so much financially? So that's what I'm going to take a few minutes today and talk about. If we look back to the way cities were built thousands of years ago, these are artist renderings of some ancient cities. What we see is that they were built around the dominant transportation technology of the day, that being your 2 feet. People walked everywhere they went, so the spacing of the buildings, the way buildings were laid out, it's all based around people who walked. People figured out how to build this way over hundreds, thousands of years of trial and error, trying things, seeing what worked, expanding on it. When we get to, this is my hometown of Brainerd, back in 1904. Probably looks very familiar to some photos you have here of your city, right? When we get to this point, you still have essentially the same basic layout and design of cities. People would get here by train, they'd get here by stagecoach, but once they got here, they would walk around everywhere. And so the old traditional downtown, the surrounding neighborhoods, all that interconnected. It's a very familiar pattern that we as humans have become used to over thousands and thousands of years. When we look at the way that we build things today, this seems very familiar to us, this seems very comfortable to us. Most of us don't think about it much. This is the way things are, right? But what we're doing is we've shifted in the last 100 years, really the last 70 years, to a style of development built around a new transportation technology, built around the automobile. We didn't test this out. We didn't try it out in Texas for 100 years to see if it would work and then learn the best things and bring them here. We just built in every city across the entire country this way all at once, within a generation. We redeveloped an entire continent around these ideas. There's some things that we didn't consider, and I want to talk about a few of the financial considerations today. When we start to look at, and this is the thing that we did early on at Strong Towns, when we start to look at different developments and different development styles, what we see really quickly is that these are not having the financial impact that we think they are. This is a dead-end cul-de-sac. This was built in the mid-1990s. When it was built, the city went out and paved the road. The cost was $6,600 per lot. We asked the question, all right, based on the taxes the city's collecting from the property owners that live on this road, how long is it going to take them to recoup what they just spent to build this road? The answer is 74 years. Now the road won't last anywhere near that long, but that's how long it will take the city to break even. This is another development. This is a little more intense development. You've got a loop with a dead-end cul-de-sac, no through traffic, nothing like that. This was built in the 1980s. It had fallen apart. The city went out and fixed it. $354,000 was the cost. We asked again, based on the taxes the city's collecting from the people who live in this development, how long is it going to take the city to recoup that money they had to spend to fix the road? The answer is 79 years. We said, okay, what if the city, because the road won't last that long, what if the city wanted to collect enough money from these people between now and the time the road fell apart to actually have the money to fix the road? The answer to that would be they would need an immediate 46% increase in taxes and annual increases of 3% over inflation every year for the next 25 years, and that's just for the roadway. Sometimes people say to me, okay, We get it. We know we lose money on residential property. We make it up on commercial. Commercial's where we've got all our revenue coming in from. This is a business park. This is the kind of thing we build to try to attract those, those new businesses coming into town. This was built in the mid-1990s. It was completely built out. The city wanted to repeat it, just build the same exact thing right next door, hoping to get the same type of return. We said, all right, if we could build the same thing for the same cost and get the same return, how would that work? $2.1 million is the amount that it would cost in today's dollars. There's $6.6 million of investment. If we took all that investment that happened in 1 year, and we took every penny of new revenue from this development and applied it to paying down the $2.1 million bond we would issue, it would take the city almost 3 decades, 29 years, just to break even. That's 29 years where everyone else's taxes would need to go up to pay for all the services that would be needed out in this development. And that's in the most wildly optimistic scenario. Here's what's going on. And we've got dozens of these examples. If you're interested, I'll give you our website at the end, and you can go look at some of these case studies from different places around the country. But we see a consistent theme over and over and over. When we build in the pattern that we build, generally the cost of the first generation of everything is paid largely by someone else. Whether it's a developer who pays for it and it's rolled into the cost of the house or the commercial property, or whether it's a grant that we can get from the state or the federal government, or it's a subsidized loan. The share that we, the public, we, the city, pay, while substantial, we often have to dig deep to find our share. But as a part of the total overall transaction, it's usually very small. What we agree as part of these projects is to take on the long-term responsibility to fix and maintain everything. So what we see is that when a new project happens, revenue starts to come in, and as a city, we're cash flow positive. We're bringing in a lot of money. That new road doesn't cost us anything. We're bringing in more money. That new pipe doesn't cost us anything. And when we get out a couple of decades, everything's just been positive. The problem is when we have to go out and fix things, when we have to actually go out and make good on that obligation that we took on a generation ago when we said, yes, we'll maintain that street. Yes, we'll maintain that pipe. What we find is that the cumulative amount of money that we brought in is not enough. And from a cash flow standpoint, we run far into the negative. When we have to fix stuff, we're losing money. How do we deal with this? The way we deal with this is to try to attract more growth. If we can get more growth, if we can get more stuff happening, we can have more cash, and that cash will allow us to deal with all these obligations that we have. And so we see in the cities that have become the most desperate in terms of having the most deterioration, the most things they have to do, they also become the most desperate in trying to attract new growth. This is that same scenario as this last one, but it's with steady, consistent growth year in and year out. And what you see is that your revenue actually starts to kind of accelerate. You're having growth upon growth upon growth. And everything is new, and everything doesn't cost you very much. And when you get to year 25 and you have to make good on that promise you made way back in year 1, you've got to spend a little bit of money, but it's not a big deal, right? Because you've had all this growth. The growth creates what we call the illusion of wealth. Because as we intuitively understand, if you lose money on every transaction, you don't make it up in volume. If you lose money on every project that you do over a generation, the further you go out into the time horizon, the more downward pressure there is on your budget. This is why cities full of very smart people doing very smart things are finding themselves broke. This is why cities who have followed all the rules, who have done all the planning, who have put all the infrastructure, capital improvements together, find a generation into this that they don't have any money to do basic things. Fix a sidewalk, fill potholes, fix a basic street. It's not that we're dumb. It's not that we're lazy. It's not that we're incompetent. It's that we have a model that doesn't work. Let me show you what does work. And it's important to mentally make a shift from what we do today, build it and they will come. It's a wonderful movie plot. It is a horrible economic development strategy. In our desperation, we expect cities now to be the dumb money at the card table, right? If you want to be a player in the game, if you want to be a city making things happen, you've got to have the sewer and the water in place, you've got to have the shovel-ready lots. When someone comes to town and they need a tax subsidy, if you want to be a player, if you want to be in the game, if you want to create jobs and growth, you've got to be prepared to fork out that incentive. This isn't how cities build wealth. This isn't how cities have ever built wealth. I'm going to show you how cities build wealth. Do you guys recognize this street? Does this ring a bell to any of you? It could be your little city here, right? If we went back far enough, it would look just like this.
Too many trees.
Yeah, too many trees.
If we look at this layout, a bunch of little pop-up shacks. This is actually my hometown in central Minnesota, back in 1870. But this literally could be anywhere. I guarantee you, maybe less trees, but if we went back far enough in your history, there's probably a picture like that at your historical museum somewhere of your city, right? And there's one like this of Dallas, and one like this of Chicago, and one like this of San Francisco and Manhattan. And if we could go back way far in time, there's one of this of Paris and Rome, and Romulus and Remus would be there somewhere, right? This is the way every city that was built prior to our auto experiment began. And for a variety of reasons, reasons that defy our ability to predict or project or even fully comprehend after the fact, a lot of these places would fail. They got to this point and that was it. What would happen when a place like this failed? Did your pension fund lose 25% of its value? Did unemployment skyrocket? Did we have to have Congress spend $1 trillion bailing out banks? No, right? A few people made some small investments, they lost a little bit of money, they salvaged what they could, and they move on to the next city. For a variety of reasons, reasons that are so complex, they defy our ability to predict or project or even fully understand, a lot of cities like this became successful. And when they became successful, they would grow in a very consistent and predictable way. They would grow incrementally up, incrementally out, and the development would become incrementally more intense. And so after 30 years of building in this city in that incremental fashion, these little pop-up shacks would become those 2- and 3-story wood structures I showed you earlier. And as the city continued to grow more wealthy, it continued to grow incrementally up, incrementally out, and become incrementally more intense, to where these 2- and 3-story wood structures would be replaced with buildings that were rock and granite facade. The way we build wealth in a community is not by going to the casino and putting it all on red. The way we will build wealth in a community is by making small incremental investments over a broad area, over a long period of time. Let me show you how valuable this style of development is and how important it is to our future. These are 2 identical blocks in my hometown. The one on the left we've labeled old and blighted. The one on the right we've labeled shiny and new. You can see they're the exact same size, exact same shape. They have the exact same thoroughfare, the exact same neighborhood. They have the same amount of public infrastructure. The only thing different about them is the style of the building that is upon them. That old and blighted block looks like this. It is the 1930s version of that pop-up block. So remember that pop-up block I showed you, the little shacks? This was, as my city was growing incrementally up and becoming incrementally more intense in the core, it was also growing incrementally out. And these 3 blocks were the next increment out on the edge. This was the cheapest style of development you could build in the late 1920s and have respect in the city, right? And the idea was, as the city continued to mature, these would eventually get 2nd stories, 3rd stories, maybe they'd be torn down, something new would be rebuilt, but they would continue to grow in that incremental pattern. That didn't happen, right? Because as soon as these were built, we had the Depression, we had World War II, and then we had a completely different style of development. We just abandoned these, moved on further outside on the edge of town. These have stagnated for years. 2 blocks over it used to look just like this. And the city had it torn down. And now today we have the drive-through taco joint. 2 lanes, big parking lot, sign, green space, no on-street parking, met all the codes, met all the regulations. Everybody was super happy about this transaction, right? We got rid of blight. We've got something nice and modern and new. Here's the problem that nobody looked at. That old and blighted block, that rundown, junky block that's stagnated for 90 years, has a total value of $1.1 million. 2 blocks over, the exact same size area, the exact same amount of public infrastructure, everything, just a different style of development, only worth $800,000. That old rundown block is worth 42% more than this brand new. And we all know the trajectory of the taco joint, right? 20 years from now, there'll be a new taco joint up the road. This one will be turned into a used car lot. 10 years later, it will be boarded up. They'll be selling meth out the back or whatever. And the city will be trying to get a grant to have it torn down, right? We've all been around long enough to see what happens with this kind of a building. In fact, we did this initial analysis in 2012. This is what has happened in the 2 years subsequent to when we did the analysis.
Wow.
Yeah, that taco joint's lost 23% of its value in 2 years. Let me ask you a question. Let's say that we as a city here in Enid, my hometown, cities across the country, realize that our future is not going to be determined by how fast we can grow outward, but how well we make use of the investments we have. And so what we decide over the next decade, what we are going to do is we are going to dedicate ourselves to doubling the property values of all the properties in our city. We don't have a lot of money. We can't throw tons of money at things. We can't over-regulate them. But we got to do things to encourage these places to become more valuable. What kind of things, and go ahead and just shout some out, would you do to double the value of this old rundown junky block over the next decade? What are some of the things you would do?
Lights, street, or
You could fix it, you could take, right now it's the ugly highway lights that are there. We could certainly, at very low cost, put some nice lighting.
paint.
We could paint the front of those buildings. They just need a little bit of love, fix up the signage. We could give it like a little facelift, it would look really nice.
Trees.
Some street trees here would do wonders. Really hot, it's south-facing, sun. It's not very fun to walk on a street in the summer with the sun beating down on you. Trees are really, really cheap. If you screw them up, you can put new trees in. They're really easy to do. Put the trees in, and it'll make that a much nicer place. Go ahead.
Awnings.
Awnings on the buildings would be fantastic. Not a very expensive improvement.
Street furniture.
You know what? We could put out some benches, put out some plantings. These things are cheap. They really make this.
Fire suppression systems.
Fire suppression systems?
I'm not talking about the actual buildings. I'm talking about this is what we run into when I talk about redevelopment here. We have on all, the east side of town, the older part of town, the fire suppression infrastructure is woefully insufficient to support the
Causing people to
redevelopment.
abandon redevelopment projects
Yeah.
because it's too costly to
I
put
hear you.
those in.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the fun, cute, the cute
Yeah.
stuff, but let's talk about the
So then we
really.
can build up. So then we can build up.
We can build a
But
second
not
story.
without fire suppression.
Right now, in my
Right.
city, it's actually illegal to put a second, you could put a second story on, but it'd have to be commercial, because it's commercially zoned. You couldn't have residential
Mixed
above, so we'd have to change the codes. Do you see what we're doing here? We're coming up as a group, we could go out on the street, pick 10 people at random, put them in a room, say, give us 50 ideas. And at the end of an hour, they could come out with 50 ideas of things we could go try. Tell me what you would do to double the value of this property over the next decade.
Burn it down.
You don't have a lot of money.
Go straight to the car wash.
You can't force the owner to do something they don't want to do. What would you do? I have no idea.
Tacos with crack, maybe that would be more.
Just speed the decline.
But it couldn't be
Here's
crack.
the thing. this style of development, the style that people use for thousands of years, the style that is the essence and core of your city, has enormous financial upside and very limited financial downside. The new style, the style we build in today, has very limited financial upside and financial downside that can literally go negative. We see the same thing on the edge of our cities. This is our Mills Fleet Farm. This is a double-sized big box store, 20 acres on the edge of town. They have an auto dealership and a gas station. It's the most valuable piece of property in the entire area. Our downtown,
What
roughly
type
20.
of building would that be? I'm not familiar with that.
Mills Fleet Farm?
Yeah, no, we don't have that. So what do they have inside? Just to try to figure out if we've got something comparable.
Okay, Mills Fleet Farm. When you walk in, have anybody been to Mills Fleet Farm? Seriously? Okay.
Oh, he's gonna bring one here now.
Yeah, it's a glorious thing. Hey, when you walk in Mills Fleet Farm, here's your product mix: auto parts, animal feed, lumber, guns and ammo, camouflage lingerie.
Yeah, we have.
You have this?
Yeah,
What do you call it?
Atwoods plus auto.
Atwoods.
it's a local,
They
yeah.
should merge.
Okay.
So that's what you're talking about. This is high-end shopping. Yeah. So
Okay, thank you.
this is our 20 acres of our downtown. So 9 blocks, this is a core downtown. Brainerd is a rundown place. Your downtown is gorgeous compared to what we have. Most of our second, third stories are completely unoccupied. A lot of our first stories are as well. A lot of dive bars. People are trying there. There's a lot of businesses making a good go of it. But it's not a place when you come to Brainerd that we take people, right? It's not.
Unless they need camo.
No, we take people here.
Okay.
Right. We don't take people here. Out here on the edge of town, we're pulling in $0.6 million an acre, huge sums of money. And in the downtown, we have total value of 78% greater, $1.1 million.
For the whole, same land size.
Same land size. The traditional style of development, the way we built for thousands of years, is financially incredibly productive. There's a reason why our ancestors, and I say that in the largest sense of the word, whether they're in Turkey or Russia or the US, there's a reason why we built this way. Because it works. We figured it out, right? We figured it out by trial and error. It works. And so when we spend hundreds of millions of dollars to build a bypass, run sewer and water out to here, put in frontage roads, not only are we getting a negative return on that investment, but we're robbing our core wealth. And our core wealth did not take that much money to build. It was built, remember, slowly and incrementally over time by people 100 years ago, and was bequeathed to us as an asset that would pay returns for our community year after year after year. Just some things for you to look at. This is Buffalo, New York. Go ahead.
Can you go back to that one?
Yeah.
Can you talk about the difference if one of the businesses goes out on the left
Oh,
side
yeah.
and one versus
Yeah.
the right side?
Okay, it's a good point, and I skipped that. Mills Fleet Farm. Someday we'll go out of business. If I say that in my hometown, it's heretical, right? But I'll point out, there's no Hudson Bay Company today, right? It is gone. Someday Mills Fleet Farm will go out of business. What happens to that site when Mills Fleet Farm is no longer an entity?
A very large taco place.
Yeah. I have no idea, but whatever it is, it will not be as valuable and productive as Mills Fleet Farm, right? This is the pinnacle right now. There's 134 different properties within these 9 square blocks. What happens when one of them loses a tenant? Or one of those businesses goes out of business? Or we figure out that, you know what, gosh, we screwed up, we have too much commercial property, not enough residential. Or we have too much residential, not enough commercial. When you start to look at these buildings, you see that Not only is this not very productive financially, but it has zero flexibility. These buildings here, not only are they financially really, really productive, but they're incredibly flexible. We don't have enough residential, that's okay, we can convert some of those second-story offices into residences. Oops, we got too much residential, well, we can switch it the other way and make them commercial. I've seen places go from being a pizza place to an accountant's office to a dental hygienist in the same building, right? Incredible flexibility. This is Buffalo, New York, one of those cities that was hollowed out after World War II with our development pattern. What I'm going to show you in the vertical is a value per acre. So think of it as financial productivity. Think of a farm field, and over here in the farm field, you're getting this much of a return on your crop, and over here you're getting this much return, right? So what I'm going to show you is the different levels of return, financial productivity you're getting throughout Buffalo. Can you tell me where the hollowed out downtown is? Right? It's right there. Even in its dilapidated form, even in its gutted out, bombed out, ripped down, half abandoned form, it still is not only more productive than all the stuff around it, but it's vastly more productive. It's what we call dummy proof, right? It is so productive that you can't screw it up. This is a smaller city, around 50,000. We see the same type of pattern. This is a smaller city, around 1,500. This is a city near me that I worked with. When I went into this city, they said, you know, all of our good developments out here and down here, we'd like to see if we could get these neighborhoods, the old neighborhoods we've got, if we could somehow get them to transition into stuff like this. Yet when we look at their value per acre and their productivity, what we find is that the highest value neighborhoods they have are the ones that they consider old and junky and run down. Our ancestors knew what they were doing. They had to, because they didn't have our wealth. They didn't have our ability to manufacture money out of nothing. They couldn't kick the can down the road because the road wasn't that far for them. They had to make good investments. They had to do smart things because they didn't have other options. And so they built places that were really, really financially productive. How do we do this today? How do we start to get back to a development pattern that builds wealth in our communities? Some lessons from a place like Memphis, Tennessee, where 2 blocks that had been abandoned post-World War II, the street used to be a streetcar stop. They had ripped out the streetcar lines. They run a highway through the middle of the neighborhood, and the place just died. Some residents of the neighborhood went out. They worked with the owners of the properties to sweep them out. They swept up the sidewalks. They painted some bike lanes. They painted some crosswalks. They put up a mural. They invited some shop owners to come in and for a day open up an ice cream stand, an art gallery, a bike shop, a bunch of different things, and fill up these businesses just for a day. They had a little street party over the weekend. What happened over the next 12 months is amazing. With zero public investment, just a little bit of elbow grease, and showing the world what could happen. After 1 year, every single storefront out there was occupied. They all had full tax-paying, full rent-paying businesses in them. There was over 24 new jobs created, $12 million of new tax base added, 18 buildings that were formerly blighted that are now off the blighted list. What we call these investments are chaotic but smart. We're traditionally acclimated to orderly but dumb kind of development. The big top-down project that we all kind of consensus agree isn't the smartest thing to do, but it's the smartest thing we can agree to do, right? Orderly but dumb, as opposed to chaotic but smart. Things that maybe we're not fully comfortable with, don't think are the best ideas, but are so low risk that why not do it? In my hometown, we put together a report identifying a bunch of these projects in that one distressed neighborhoods with the taco joint and the old and blighted block. We went out there and worked for a summer. We saw where a mom walking with a stroller, walking through the ditch with beads up to her waist. We said, "What are you doing?" "Well, I've got to get to the grocery store. It's not safe to walk on the street, so I'm walking here through the ditch. So an elderly woman walking in the middle of the street with a walker. What are you doing? Well, there's no sidewalk over here. I've got to get to the pharmacy. This is the only way to go. We started to document these things. And after a year of working in this neighborhood, we came up with this list of projects, little things that we could do. Now understand, right now my city is trying to spend $8.5 million to run sewer and water 1.5 miles out of town to the airport so that we can have an industrial park out at the airport. We already have an industrial park, not at the airport, but somewhere else, that we built in the 90s that's only half occupied. But this one would be air-oriented, so that is a better development opportunity apparently. We identified 8 projects in this core neighborhood. Plant some trees here. Trim some trees over here. Put in a crosswalk here. Put in some a little protective area for pedestrians and bikers here. Put in a bike lane over here. 8 little projects. The total cost of our projects, $16,700. That's incremental. That's chaotic but smart. That's that not go to the casino, put it all in red, but make small incremental investments over a broad area over a long period of time. Let's say that we go out and we spend $16,700 on these 8 projects, and all of them are completely worthless and fail. Nobody finds the neighborhood more enjoyable to live in. Nobody finds their life a little bit easier now that they can have a little crosswalk or the trees. And it basically amounts to nothing. What have we lost? We've lost $16,700, right? What have we gained? Well, we've learned 8 things that don't work. And it only cost us $16,700 to find out. It didn't cost us $8.5 million, it cost us $16,700. So next year we go out and we spend another $16,000 doing 8 different things. But the 8 things we picked out will work. Why? Because we're out there in the neighborhood seeing where people struggle and we're trying to address those things. When I was a city engineer, I said, you know, I think you could use a sidewalk here. His answer was, why would you say that, John? These types of investments are not only high returning, but they're high returning for our people as well. We're not only making good investments in our place, low risk investments, but we're making high return investments in the quality of life of our people. Because if you can walk on a sidewalk instead of a ditch, that's better for you. Even if it's just incrementally better, right? If we dedicate ourselves to making incremental improvements throughout our neighborhoods, small investments over a broad area over a long period of time, what we'll see is the market respond to that. Because when we make small investments in our place, people will make small investments in their place, and we can restart that virtuous cycle upward. Our website, strongtowns.org. If you're interested in more of this stuff, you can go there. There's a bunch of case studies, videos. We do a blog every day of the week. We do podcasts once a week. I'm going to let Tripp talk for a little bit, and then we'll love to talk about your city and the things going on here. So thank you very much.
This really was Chuck's chance to showcase some really important lessons for you all. I just want to give you a little background on what we do and our perspective on things and some first impressions on the Enid as we came into town and began to look around. I'm from Greenville, South Carolina. It's a city of 60,000, so it's a little bit bigger than Enid. We're a city that has been working on our downtown. My first job was in economic development with the city. My boss has been there for 35 years. She's still there. She frequently says in talks that our downtown is a 35-year overnight success story because we continue to get written up in all these papers and magazines about what a fantastic downtown Greenville is, and it is a fantastic downtown. A lot of people think it is an overnight success story. You all know here in Enid that just like in Greenville, this takes a lot of work. It's a long haul. is a tremendous amount of effort, and there are many, many different partners involved in getting that done. We work in small and medium-sized towns across the country. We share the same kind of passion that Chuck does for small and medium-sized towns. One of the things that we do is community branding and marketing. It was a thrill to review the effort that you went through in 2011 in branding Enid. It's oftentimes when I work in a community, and we've done that kind of work ourselves, you know, we come back several years later and we look to see how it's been implemented. And what struck me today as we were driving in, first and foremost, when we did the search, your branding was one of the first things that popped up on the screen, so that was critically important. And then as we left Oklahoma City, there was a billboard that indicated we were headed this way and what to do. And then as we continued into town, the branding continued its way through the community. And then I came to learn from Kelly that there's a splendid partnership of 5 entities that meet together on a regular basis to work together. And I'll tell you, you're in rarefied air. You can have the Convention and Visitors, or the Visitors Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce, the Main Street Program.
In the city and the Development Alliance.
Right. When you can have 5 entities like that actually get in the room together and have a conversation, that's pretty astonishing. So I really want to reinforce how positive that is. And please don't, whatever you do, don't stop doing it, however painful it may be at times. And there may be future directors or staff people or board members who may just be a burr under your saddle. But grit your teeth and bear it out, because keeping that partnership alive is what keeps our communities working. And so that was a thrill to hear. So 2 really great first impressions today as I came in. 1, how you're implementing the branding, and 2, how you're working together in the community. And then certainly I was blown away at the social enterprise of the coffee shop where we had lunch today. That's pretty cutting edge. And you know, being from South Carolina, a very conservative state, where our churches play a critical role in our day-to-day lives. It was really a lesson for me to take back home on how a shop can embrace both the religious aspect of the community and the community service aspect that's so important to being spiritual in your life, and then sort of be cool at the same time. And I think that's a lot of what institutions, religious institutions, are grappling with to some degree these days. And so it's neat to see that play out here in Enid. A couple other things that are observations, and I'm eager to hear your thoughts, and that's what I'd love to transition to after I sum up some thoughts. It was really impressive to see the kind of investment that you're making in things like your meeting facility here, the fact that you've retained the county courthouse in a sensitive way. I've worked in places where the courthouse has become torn down and replaced with a behemoth monster in the middle of the square. And to see the care that you've taken with some of your historic buildings in the community. So all those are really important.